Most people think monsters hide in the dark. They're wrong. Monsters hide in paperwork. If a town disappears overnight, people notice. If 34 people disappear over 6 months, spread across 5 counties, each reported as a hiking accident, boating accident, runaway teenager, dementia patient, or fatal bear attack, nobody notices. That's why people like me still have jobs. My name isn't important anymore. The hunters stopped using real names decades ago. Names become leverage. Families become targets. Graves become invitations. Among hunters, I was simply known as Ash. 15 years, 112 confirmed hunts, 23 scars worth remembering, 7 partners buried, 1 mistake I'd spend the rest of my life trying to fix. The phone rang at exactly 2:17 in the morning, not my cell phone. That one stayed in a drawer most days. This was the black rotary phone sitting on the corner of my cabin desk. No caller ID, no ringtone, just a sharp metallic bell that somehow sounded louder than any modern phone ever could. It only rang when someone had already exhausted every other option. I picked it up before the second ring. Talk, silence, then breathing. Heavy, controlled. Whoever was on the other end had been running. Finally, a voice. "They found another one." I closed my eyes. Alive? No. Witnesses? No. Evidence? Yes. That got my attention. Evidence was rare. Bodies were common. Proof was almost impossible. Location? Highway 17. There are hundreds of Highway 17s in America. He didn't need to specify which one. I already knew. Northern Michigan, 3 hours north of the last disappearance. Exactly 118 miles from a place that technically didn't exist. I'll leave in an hour. Bring silver? No. Iron? No. Then what? I looked toward the locked cabinet in the corner. Everything? The line went dead. Hunters don't travel light. The movies get that wrong. Nobody walks into the woods carrying a shotgun and confidence. Confidence gets people killed. Preparation keeps them alive. I unlocked the cabinet. Inside were dozens of hard cases, each labeled in faded white paint: iron, salt, relics, audio, chemicals, specimens. One case sat alone on the top shelf. No label. I hadn't opened it in 6 years. I left it where it was. Not yet. Instead, I packed the standard kit: thermal cameras, night optics, forensic lights, sample containers, 3 different ammunition types, cold-forged iron blades, medical supplies, road flares, a Geiger counter. Most people laugh at that one until it starts clicking. By sunrise, I was driving north. The farther I drove, the quieter the world became. Gas stations disappeared first. Then radio stations. Eventually, even GPS stopped making sense. Roads appeared where maps insisted there were none. Roads disappeared where they should have been. Every experienced hunter knows the feeling. Places don't become haunted. Reality becomes flexible. That's when you start paying attention. Around noon, I spotted the sheriff waiting beside an abandoned ranger station. Sheriff Daniel Mercer, late 50s, weathered face, bloodshot eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. When I stepped out of the truck, he didn't ask who I was, didn't ask for credentials, didn't ask why someone from a cabin 3 states away had arrived before the FBI. He simply handed me a folder. "They told me you'd come." They? He hesitated. "The old woman." I frowned. "What old woman?" "The one who knew your name." I hadn't told anyone my name. Not my real one. Not the one hunters used. Mercer swallowed. "She said Ash would come." A cold knot settled in my stomach. Only hunters knew that name, and nearly all of them were dead. The crime scene wasn't much to look at. At first, a rusted pickup truck sat half off the road. Driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. Coffee still warm. The body lay nearly 40 feet away. No blood, no visible injuries. Eyes wide open, expression frozen somewhere between terror and disbelief. The county coroner believed it was cardiac arrest. He was wrong. I crouched beside the body. Something wasn't right. The victim's boots. The mud on the soles came from two different environments. One boot carried dry forest soil, the other carried black clay that didn't exist anywhere within 50 miles. I lifted the man's left hand. Under every fingernail. Fine white powder, not chalk, not dust, bone, human bone, ground into powder. Someone had tried desperately to claw through something. But what? The sheriff watched silently. You see it? I see enough. I stood. Where was he found? Right there. No. The sheriff blinked. What? He died there. I pointed toward the truck. But whatever happened to him? I slowly turned toward the endless pine forest. Started somewhere else. A breeze rolled through the trees. Every branch swayed. Except one, about 80 yards into the forest. One pine stood perfectly still. No movement, no sound, nothing. I stared at it for several long seconds. The sheriff noticed. What is it? I didn't answer. Because something had just stepped out from behind that tree. Too far away to identify. Tall, thin, completely motionless, watching us. When I blinked, it was gone. That was the moment I knew this wasn't another isolated hunt. Something had been waiting for us to arrive. And somehow, it already knew who I was. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. The forest had gone silent. Not the kind of silence you notice. The kind your body notices before your mind does. No birds, no insects, even the wind seemed unwilling to move beyond the tree line. I kept staring at the pine where the figure had been standing. Nothing, just bark, needles, shadows. You see something? Mercer finally asked. Maybe. You gonna tell me? When I'm sure. I opened the back of my truck and retrieved a compact thermal monocular. Most people think thermal cameras show everything. They don't. Some things don't produce heat, some things produce too much, and a very small number produce neither. I scanned the trees. Rabbits glowed bright white. A pair of deer stood almost 200 yards away. An owl perched high above us. Normal. Then, for less than a second, every heat signature in the woods disappeared. The display turned black. Not blank. Black. As if the forest itself had stopped existing. The image returned just as quickly. I lowered the monocular. That's impossible, I muttered. Mercer heard me. I've been saying that for 3 weeks. Back at the ranger station, Mercer spread aerial photographs across an old wooden table. Look! He pointed to a stretch of Highway 17 winding through miles of state forest. Every disappearance happened within this corridor. There were 26 red circles. Children, hunters, truck drivers, a state trooper, a geologist, even 2 search and rescue volunteers. Each had vanished under different circumstances, different times, different weather. No connection, except location. What did the FBI say? I asked. Mercer laughed. Not because it was funny. They stopped coming. Stopped? They lost a team. I looked up. A whole team? 6 agents. My stomach tightened. Professional investigators don't simply disappear, not 6 at once. Mercer slid another photograph toward me. It had been taken from a helicopter. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I noticed the road. Highway 17 entered the forest, but never came out. The asphalt simply ended, not physically, photographically. The picture became blurred beyond a certain point, as if someone had smeared the image with a thumb. What happened? The pilot swears the road kept going. But the camera disagreed. By late afternoon, we reached the last confirmed location of the missing FBI team, an abandoned service road hidden behind overgrown brush. Their SUVs were still there, doors open and weapons untouched, body armor, medical kits, satellite phones, everything, except the agents. One coffee thermos was still half full. 3 years as a homicide detective had taught Mercer to notice details. 15 years hunting monsters had taught me to notice the details people refused to see. The dirt around the vehicles carried hundreds of footprints, but only entering, none leaving. Mercer crouched beside one. "I've seen that before." "No, you haven't." He looked up. "I investigated this." "You investigated people arriving." I pointed toward the woods. "Nobody walked back." He followed my finger. The footprints stopped abruptly at the edge of the trees. Not faded, not covered. Stopped. As though 26 people had simply ceased to exist in the middle of a step. We found the first recording just before sunset. One of the FBI body cameras, still attached to a tactical vest hanging from a branch nearly 15 feet above the ground. The memory card was intact. We played it inside the ranger station. Static. Trees. The lead agent speaking into the camera. "Search Team Bravo entering Grid 7. More static. Heavy breathing. Someone laughing. Not one of the agents. A child. The recording shook violently. The camera swung toward the trees. Nothing there. The child laughed again. Closer this time. Another agent whispered, "Who brought a kid?" Nobody answered. The laughter changed. It wasn't laughter anymore. It only sounded like something imitating happiness without understanding it. The lead agent drew his rifle. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then a voice, his own voice, coming from somewhere in the trees. "Identify yourself." Mercer slowly looked at me. I paused the recording. "What?" "Play it again." I rewound 5 seconds. This time I listened carefully. The imitation wasn't perfect. It copied the words, the tone, even the breathing. But it got one thing wrong. The echo answered before the original voice had completely finished speaking, as if it already knew what he was going to say. I shut the laptop. "We're done listening?" Mercer frowned. "That's it?" "I've heard enough." "What was it?" "I don't know." That answer bothered me more than it bothered him. I usually knew, or at least had a theory. This time, nothing fit. Night settled over the forest faster than it should have. By 7:30, it looked closer to midnight. Mercer locked every door in the ranger station. "People around here don't go outside after dark anymore." "Smart." "You saying we shouldn't?" I looked through the window. The tree line had disappeared into a wall of blackness. "No." I reached into my duffel and removed a small leather journal, its cover cracked with age. Inside were handwritten notes dating back more than a century. Every hunter inherited copies, observations, sketches, warnings. Most entries described creatures we'd long since classified. Page after page. Nothing matched what we'd seen today. Then a folded piece of paper slipped free. I'd never noticed it before. The ink had faded almost beyond recognition. Across the top, someone had written, "Field Report, 1968. Below that, in hurried handwriting, "If you hear yourself speaking from the trees, do not answer. It already knows where you are." The page ended there. No signature. No date, no explanation, just one final sentence written upside down across the bottom margin. "The road is only a road until it decides you're ready." Before I could say anything, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then every radio in the station came alive at the same time. Static. Mercer reached for his sidearm. The static slowly transformed into words. Quiet, almost whispering. "Ash." My blood turned cold. Mercer looked at me. "It said your name." "I know." "Ash." This time it came from outside, not the radio. The voice drifted through the trees, patient and calm. Come outside. It wasn't shouting. It didn't need to. Because it sounded exactly like someone I hadn't heard in 6 years. My former partner, the one I'd buried with my own hands, the one whose grave I'd visited every year since. He died on a hunt in Montana. I'd watched him die, yet there it was, his voice, clear as day. You left me here? Mercer whispered. Who is that? I couldn't answer, because for the first time in 15 years, I wanted to believe the impossible. Then 3 slow knocks echoed against the ranger station's front door. Knock, knock, knock. Mercer raised his pistol. Neither of us moved. The door had no window. Whoever, or whatever, stood on the other side knew we were listening. And then, with perfect calm, it spoke one final sentence. I've been waiting for Hunter number 1. No one alive should have known that title. No one. Yet somehow, something waiting in those woods knew not only my name, but the identity I'd spent 15 years making sure the world forgot. The knocking stopped, not because whoever stood outside had left, because it no longer needed to knock. Mercer kept his pistol trained on the door while I slowly reached into my pack. My hand closed around something I hadn't planned on using tonight. A brass compass. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Its face was scratched. Its glass was cracked. The needle had long since stopped pointing north. It pointed toward monsters. Not all of them. Only the ones that didn't belong. The needle spun wildly, then froze. Not toward the front door, toward the wall. Something was already inside. Back away, I whispered. Mercer didn't argue. We took 3 careful steps toward the rear of the station. The old wooden floor creaked beneath our boots. Another creak answered from somewhere in the hallway. Not an echo. Footsteps, slow, measured, almost curious. A shadow stretched across the wall before anything stepped into view. Then it appeared. At first it looked human. Too human. A man in an old ranger's uniform. Hat pulled low over his face, hands folded neatly behind his back. He smiled. Everything about him was believable, except his proportions. His arms were too long, his shoulders too narrow, his knees bent just a little too far backward, like someone had assembled a person from memory instead of anatomy. Evening, it said pleasantly. Mercer fired. The first round struck its chest. The second hit its throat. The third should have shattered its skull. Instead, the bullets passed through as though it were made of smoke. The smile never changed. I wasn't talking to you, it said. Its eyes found mine. I've waited a very long time for you, Ash. I pulled Mercer through the back door. The creature didn't chase us. It simply watched. Waiting. Hunters learned something early in this line of work. If a monster wants you to run, never ask yourself why. Ask where it wants you to go. We sprinted into the forest anyway, because staying inside would have been suicide. Branches whipped across our faces as we pushed deeper between the pines. The compass needle spun harder than I'd ever seen. Mercer stumbled. What are we running from? I don't think we're running from it. What? I think we're running toward whatever it's guarding. The trees ended without warning. We stepped into a clearing that should not have existed. A town, not ruins, not abandoned buildings. A town. Streetlights glowed warm amber. Storefront windows reflected moonlight. Cars sat parked along the curb. A swing rocked gently in a playground with no wind. It looked alive. Except there wasn't a single person. No voices, no dogs, no electricity humming through power lines. Nothing. Just silence. The sign at the entrance leaned crookedly beside the road. Its paint had almost completely peeled away. Only one word remained readable. Briar's Hollow. Mercer looked at me. I've lived here my whole life. I know. I've never heard of this town. You weren't supposed to. The moment we crossed the city limits, every watch we carried stopped. My flashlight dimmed. The compass needle snapped in half. Somewhere nearby. A church bell rang. 1, 2, 3 times. Every porch light turned on at once. Then every front door slowly swung open. Not a person stepped outside. Instead, people appeared behind the windows, hundreds of them, standing perfectly still, watching us. Children, old women, teenagers, hunters, the missing FBI agents, the truck driver, the geologist, every missing person from Mercer's files. They were all there. None of them blinked. Mercer whispered, "They're alive." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "They're being remembered." I could barely believe the words coming out of my own mouth because they weren't mine. They came from something my first mentor once told me. There are places that don't kill you. They keep you. A little girl stepped into the middle of the street. She couldn't have been older than 8. She held a stuffed rabbit in one hand. "Are you here to take us home?" Mercer's face softened. I grabbed his shoulder before he could answer. "Don't!" "She's just a kid." "No." The girl smiled. "You've gotten older." My heart stopped. She wasn't talking to Mercer. She was talking to me. "I remember when you came here the first time." I stared. "I've never been here." "Yes." She tilted her head. "You just forgot." Pain exploded behind my eyes. Fragments, not memories, pieces, rain, a burning truck, a younger version of myself, running, someone screaming, an older hunter dragging me through the woods. Behind us, the same impossible town. Then darkness. I staggered backward. Mercer caught me. "What happened?" "I've been here." "When?" "I don't know." "No." I looked around the empty streets. It made me forget. The ranger appeared at the far end of town, still smiling, still walking at the same calm pace. One step, another, no hurry, because it knew something we didn't. "You built this place," I said. It laughed. "No." "You feed it." "No." "What are you?" It stopped beneath the flickering streetlight. "I keep the door." The church bell rang again. This time every person standing inside the windows slowly raised one hand and pointed behind us. We turned. The road we had entered on was gone. Only endless forest remained. Mercer whispered, "We're trapped." "No." I reached into my pack one last time, for the case I'd almost left behind. The unlabeled one. Inside rested a rusted railroad spike wrapped in black leather. Every hunter knew the story. Most believed it was a myth. The first spike, forged before the order had a name, driven into places where reality had begun to break. It wasn't a weapon. It was a lock. The ranger finally stopped smiling. "Don't." I ignored him. The ground beneath the town vibrated. The buildings groaned. The people in the windows began screaming. Not from pain, from panic. They knew what was coming. I drove the spike into the center of the road. The sound that followed wasn't metal striking pavement. It sounded like glass cracking across the entire sky. Every building twisted. Streetlights exploded. The church collapsed inward without making a sound. The smiling ranger's body stretched impossibly tall before tearing apart into ribbons of black smoke. Then, everything vanished. Mercer and I awoke lying beside Highway 17 just before sunrise. The abandoned ranger station was gone. The town was gone. The clearing was gone. Only forest remained. State police found us 3 hours later. According to them, we'd only been missing for 8 hours. Mercer looked at me. It wasn't 8 hours. No. How long? I checked my watch. The date had changed. Not by 1 day, by 9. 9 days had passed. 3 weeks later, I sat alone in my cabin writing the official report. Most of it would never be read. Hunters don't publish books. We write warnings. At the bottom of the report, I added one final sentence. Threat temporarily contained. Classification unknown. Before filing it away, I opened the evidence bag we'd recovered from the highway. Inside was a photograph that hadn't been there before. It showed 6 people standing in front of the Briars Hollow welcome sign. One of them was Mercer. Another was me, only I wasn't the man I am now. I looked no older than 10. Standing beside me was an elderly hunter with one hand resting on my shoulder. Across the back of the photograph, someone had written in faded ink, "The first hunter always returns." Beneath that, in handwriting I recognized as my own, were 4 words I had absolutely no memory of writing. Don't let me remember. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then the black rotary phone rang. One sharp metallic bell. I answered. "Talk!" A woman's voice whispered. "We found another town." "Where?" There was a long silence. Finally, she answered. "It's impossible. Try me. It's in the middle of the Gulf." I looked at the photograph again. For the first time in 15 years, I realized every hunt I'd survived hadn't been random. Someone, or something, had been guiding me from one impossible place to the next. And if the message on that photograph was true, the greatest monster I'd ever hunt might be the part of myself I'd been forced to forget. The line went dead. I locked the photograph inside the unlabeled case, packed my truck, and started driving toward a town that couldn't possibly exist.